center yourself, ground yourself in the understanding that you are a perfectly capable, perfectly functional, and perfectly agential or independent person that has everything they need within them integrally installed already there that can get you to wherever you want to be in your life. It's just going to take a different approach.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, to take your journey a little further, and maybe you can just pick, because I mean, I know, of course, there's so many different things I'm sure that you could share. Some particular aspects or moments or highlights, whatever it is you'd like to share then from that post-schooling onwards as an adult. Like, what else would you like to share about how that's gone or how you've compensated, anything around that?
Okay. Okay. And you all did ask earlier what were my compensating or compensatory practices. And so I will now zoom the lens out to a broader spectrum of my life period and say that my greatest compensational move that I, or compensatory or whatever move that I made was to teach myself a couple of saleable skills, a couple of vocations or trades. And so when I was in high school, I had a friend that got me a job at a restaurant. And so it was short order. It was pretty mindless, but it gave me a taste of what the culinary services, the food service industry was like. And so that resonated with me. And I thought, well, it's a respectable job. And I even checked in with my father and I said, what do you think about me being a cook or a chef? And he says, well, and I'm 17 or 16, and he's, yeah, that's fine. And again, he's probably like, oh, wiping the sweat off his brow, going, yeah, all the crap we've been through, yeah, that would be fine. If you could go and become a cook or a chef, that would be great. So then that gave me that self-esteem boost, and I thought, well, okay, so this is a somewhat honorable profession, because again, I'd always hear these lectures like, you're going to be homeless, you're going to be a bum living on the, on the grates in the streets out there, you're going to be a trash man. So cooking, and that I applied myself to it, and I learned, and when I got out of high school, I went into a ski resort outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, and it was there were several kitchens on the property, and the one that I started working at was a classical French restaurant. So I did that in Virginia for a number of years, and then I moved to Florida, which is where I am presently. I worked as a cook here for a while, and then I got with with Disney. I hope I can say that. Not plugging them in any way, but I got a job with Disney in the early to mid 90s, and they taught me a lot. So I had that. And while I was working as a cook in Florida, I kind of turned into a workaholic, and I would work 7 days a week. I also started a landscape business on the side. From working, I would work 5, 6 days a week as a cook in the evenings. I had time in the morning, so I bought a trailer and some lawn equipment, and because I fell in love with plants, because there's it's 365 down here. There's no winter season for things to shut down. So I started to really get into the local horticulture and the local plants and so forth. So that was another outlet and avenue for me. And I really threw myself into it. And that was some of that obsessive, dogged determination that was probably a trauma response to what I went through in my childhood. So I just would convergently focus on things and really just almost overdo it. Again, being a workaholic. So where I'm heading with this, my thesis here is that if you can do doctor, lawyer, engineer. Don't think you can't. But what I did was I went to vocations. I went to honorable trades like being a cook, and then I eventually became a chef. When I worked for Disney, I moved up to chef, and then I actually opened my own restaurant. Now, from that point on, I sort of jokingly referred to myself as being chronically self-employed. So I would be curious to know in the demographics of dyslexics, how many people who went on to become either self-employed or entrepreneurs, where they developed a thriving
Yeah.
Right. So
That's a
I'm
high
dropping
number.
that in as
Hmm.
yeah, as a hint and a lure that there is nothing wrong with being your own person, and it can involve honorable trades like HVAC or plumbing or electrician. So yeah, so that kind of brings us up to the present. Now, to speak to a couple of things that happened right after high school, I felt a terrible amount of guilt for not going to college. I want to share that too, that there was a dark period from about 18 to 22 where I just constantly, and I did take community college courses. I took a few business courses and business math courses. I did want to end up being self-employed at some time. I guess I knew at that point in my life that I might be interested in entrepreneurship or self-employment. So I took business theory and business mathematics, and I did fairly good because what was interesting is now I'm paying for it out of my own pocket. So, but yeah, I didn't ever get a degree. I never got an associate's or a bachelor's or anything like that. Um, but then as I matured and I aged, I realized that I can teach myself, but not in the kind of annoying way that you think you're a know-it-all, and there was some compensation in there in that learning period where I would like horticulture and botany. I love it, but in the beginning I would try to onboard so much information and then just parrot it back out. And I thought, no, you're it. And I joked about Cliff Clavin earlier, who was a character on Cheers, and he would always sit at the bar and he'd spout off trivial random information, and half of it was nonsense, but he thought he was a scholar, So I had those moments, but then I caught myself and I was like, dude, no, seriously, just focus on the true spirit of learning and the true spirit of having a depth of knowledge and an apprehension of what you're talking about. So I went through that maturation process, and I'm still struggling with it. Anything I take to, I try to check in with myself and say, okay, are you really learning this? Is there a depth there, or are you just regurgitating information or parroting things that you've heard? So I will cautiously say that I'm self-taught in a lot of ways, but nonetheless, I try to pack a humility into that and say, so my latest tangent, the latest thing that I've been on in the last 5 years is philosophy, and it's taught me a lot about how to ground yourself. And one thing I love is skepticism in philosophy, and not the cynical kind of skepticism like, oh, everything's false and bogus. It's like a unending, ceaseless inquiry, and that just absolutely opens me up because inquiry is essential and not knowing is essential. So it's that idea in skepticism that I can never truly know anything, but I can hold ideas and beliefs so that I can have conversations and I can do useful things. So that's been a real big epiphany in the last few years. And I'm probably going beyond dyslexia at this point, but it speaks to this idea that the journey of learning and discovery
Yeah.
is never ending, never ending. And I kind of paradoxically say I can never know anything because obviously I do onboard information and it is knowledge, but that I don't use that knowledge or misuse it in a way that they call it propositional tyranny. Like I'm right, you're wrong. There's a hard binary here and there's no space in between us. And, I know you don't, that kind of thing. I stay away from that. And part of it is from childhood and the difficulty of actually learning things and apprehending things. It's taught me that humility to say, I don't know, but I do want to learn, and then whatever I learn, I'll use it as just a means or vehicle for asking more questions. So
I mean, there are so many aspects of what you've described about your sort of journey as an adult that really resonate with what we've observed about dyslexia in general and in children as well. I mean, it just really sort of reinforces a lot of the stuff that we talk about.
Well, and not
mm,
to mention
Yeah.
that foundational piece, that lifelong learning piece, I think is what, really is the crux of it, right? What we really want for our kids is that they don't get so beaten down if they have a difficult, challenging experience that they don't then associate that with the actual learning. Like that
Yeah.
it's
mm,
it really is distinct in a lot of ways, like sort of the paths that sometimes you have to take to get certain places and learning.
Yeah, and to
yeah,
really emphasize that, for the all the dyslexic kids out there now who are struggling with school, I mean, school is not the be all and end all of learning. And I think
yeah,
that's really like a key point to get across here.
And sometimes
hmm
it's a really important means to an end, if you have a specific goal.
Hmm.
So, it's obviously a tricky balance there, but it's not the same. It's not
Yeah.
certainly not the same as learning.
Okay, everyone. So Sonia actually had to step out, but we're going to continue this really interesting, or I'm going to continue this really interesting conversation with Justin. Yeah, anything more that you want to add about your sort of life as a dyslexic adult and how you feel that dyslexia has impacted you or has not impacted you in sort of surprising ways?
One thing I want to add is that in my I guess midlife, since my probably late 40s. Now, I had a brain injury at 41, so I'll have to put that in there as a point of fact or whatever, a little marker in my history. But one thing I noticed that came out of that was I did get that classic transposition of words in my writing. When I'm typing away, I misspell words now where I never had done that before. And I wasn't a huge typist in the, say, the first decade of the 2000s or in the 90s. I didn't type as much, nearly as much as I do now. I do quite a bit of writing. And so I transpose letters. So instead of writing the word palm, I'll write plam. Or instead of for, I'll write offer, OFR. And it's serial. Like I can't escape it. And I kind of laugh now. I used to get mad at myself, but I'm like, oh, you spell opera again, or plam. Or, I use those as examples. But so it's still with me. It's still very much there. And it may have been exacerbated by whatever the heck it was I dealt with 12 years ago or 11 years ago, and took me several years to deal with and get through. But that's something. So I would say, from my experience, it's a lifelong journey. I don't think. Now, I ignored dyslexia probably in my 30s and 40s until I had my brain injury. Okay, so this is probably another way to approach this. I didn't read a lot, and I didn't go into the type of modalities or whatever practices that would make it apparent to me that I'm dyslexic. So very little in the way of reading or engaging with things that would stimulate that process or whatever's going on. So, but again, on the posterior side of the injury and my wanting to read a lot more, I went from not reading any books to pouring through about maybe 7 or 8 books a year that were pretty technical and pretty difficult. I don't like fiction. I can only read nonfiction for some reason, and so I'd read really philosophical books or books on psychology or whatever, and it was mind-numbing. It was very difficult, but I forced myself to try to read these things and understand what they were talking about. And in that, I came back full circle to where I couldn't focus. I had to read sentences, especially if I was in an area with distraction. So if I'm on a plane or somewhere out in public, it was terrible. I really have to confine myself to a quiet space. And then I can sit and read and basically onboard the information that's in the book. And again, with typing, I've noticed that that's become a sporadic but nonetheless noticeable occurrence. So yeah, that's interesting that happened. But yeah, but nonetheless, I am very forgiving of myself, and I'm very pragmatic, and I don't judge. I love myself, and I care enough about who I am. Sometimes I get impatient. Like if I'm banging away on writing a few paragraphs and I keep making these, and thank goodness for the spell check thing, because I'll just let them go. I'll just go back and hit the spell check, and that's kind of lazy. But and sometimes I get mad at myself and I'll erase a whole sentence, and I'll be like, spell that one word right, and this is your punishment. So sometimes I go back and forth on that. But anyway, not to discourage anybody. You be patient with yourself and do what you can. So, but I would say adult life with dyslexia is very much more manageable than when you're going through that 12 years of primary education and into your collegiate career. It's more on your terms, and you can set the time and the space for when you're onboarding information. I've also found that in the age of videos and YouTube and other streaming type services, that audio is much easier for me. I sit and watch. I don't watch television anymore. I've gotten rid of the TV, and I'll just sit and watch lectures on YouTube. And it's the stuff that I'm into, or talks or dialogues between people. And I find that I will be able to absorb the information better that way than if I'm reading. And I still enjoy reading, although I've kind of paused on the reading recently. But yeah, so audio input might be, if you're struggling with written words, audio might be good.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think I think the you sort of younger generations who are in school now, they just really take it for granted, all this audio and video
Yeah.
material, this just vast, I mean, for all intents and purposes, infinite supply of audio and video
Right.
media that I think is really beneficial for people with dyslexia, because there are so many other ways to get information other than reading.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I'll put out there, and this is me speaking, so it's not that I would want to project this onto anybody, but for me, it's like they say, use it or lose it. And so constantly, if your childhood was experience is or was discouraging, that I would urge you to muscle your way through the continuous onboarding of information, even if it doesn't seem like it's super intellectually astute or anything like that. Just work to the best of your ability to keep the cycle going of taking on new information and make it creative information. Don't make it, and this again, I don't want to make this prescriptive or that I'm projecting myself onto anybody, but make it stimulating in a fun way. Make it creative if you want. If you learn a language, learn music, learn, for me, again, philosophy, and I love botany and horticulture. So those are the things I nerd on. And I find that if I can continually apply myself, that my ability to recall information stays fluid and that my ability to think is fluid. And this is not said out of arrogance or hubris or anything. You want that brain muscle of yours, metaphorically speaking, to stay healthy and stay exercised. And I think that'll make a big difference too. And that can be hard. Again, if your story resonates or it has similar tones as mine did, that it can be off-putting to, learning can become, it can be a negative reinforcement. You're just like, why? Oh, I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. So it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And I don't even think it's difficult. It's just different. And so the ease you can facilitate ease by understanding that it's different and that you have to be novel in your curiosity about, well, how do I as an individual learn? Everybody else in the room might learn their way. How do I learn? How do I take on information? And that.
Okay, so circling back to childhood, you've given, I think, a lot of really good advice and pearls of wisdom for both parents of dyslexic kids and for dyslexic kids themselves. Is there anything specifically that you can think of that you really would have wanted to know as a dyslexic kid?
So in other words, if I could go back and coach myself as
Exactly.
an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, the best thing I could do for me, I think, is to just reassure my younger self that as ugly as things can get and as frustrating as things can get, and as much as you feel misunderstood, and you are genuinely misunderstood, that everything will come out fine. And I'm speaking to myself, so I would then broaden that perhaps for others. If I'm speaking to somebody who's young right now, to say, much as I said earlier, that no matter what happens, center yourself, ground yourself in the understanding that you are a perfectly capable, perfectly functional, and perfectly agential or independent person that has everything they need within them integrally installed already there, that can get you to wherever you want to be in your life. It's just going to take a different approach. And so I may not have been that technical to my child self, but I'm saying this now to others and probably to myself, that you're just going to have to come up with novel means of navigation for the next 10 years of your life. And also, don't listen to the hype coming from your parents about how important it is. Because both my folks went to college. Both of my folks had high ideals for me. They wanted, they were very set. They set the bar up to be, you need to go to college and get that, master's in whatever and achieve and accomplish. And I appreciate that. And I want that for everyone. But given my route, my path that I was on, it just wasn't in the cards. Certainly was not due to lack of intelligence, but I just know, given the trajectory that I was on all the way into high school years, that college would have been just as much of a nightmare for me, because I just don't think that way, or I just don't process in a way that they would expect of me, because it never gets easier. It's just the higher you rank, the harder it gets, and I knew that. And that was part of the sort of, again, that period of remorse. So again, going back to the child self, I would say, listen, take that pressure off yourself. There are multiple diverse ways to become a young adult with regard to whatever it is you choose to be your vocation, your career, your educational path, there are ways to navigate that, and just know that. So that's probably the piece I would try to instill upon myself, is to say what you're going through and what is being said to you now is being said with good intentions. There's no malice. It's just that that's what they want for you, and ultimately they want good for you. They want you to be a successful person. And so we have to define success sometimes and say, well, is it that MBA? Is it the six-figure job and all the material gain that comes from it? Okay, but part of that having to be scrappy and be inventive is I'm not a very materialistic person, and I don't aspire to uh, high ideals with material gain and so forth. I don't need a fancy car. I have a driveway full of pickup trucks because of the landscaping I used to do. I like trucks. They're fine and they get me around. So and it's not settling. It's just it's perspectival. It's like, well, this is what I like and this is what I do. So be yourself. Be scrappy. Be inventive. Be creative, because inside of you is a genius. Is somebody who is capable of expressing in their own way. And to get on a soapbox for a minute, I think Gen A and Gen Z, if I could bullhorn to them, I'd say, listen, buck the system, break it open, reconfigure, reformation, all these radical words, and we don't have to destroy anything. It's just, let's reconfigure how we do it, and let's get creative and figure out what really is important to your generation and what means. Now you have to feed yourself, you have to provide for yourself, you want to make a good life for yourself, but think outside of the box, to use that really kind of tired cliche. Just think differently. And that, I would say to the dyslexic as well, is that just be novel, be creative, be stubborn and inventive and all these things, and you'll probably surprise yourself with what you come up with. So I would say it to an entire generation, and I would say it to a dyslexic person, is that maybe we can re-lens what success means and what achievement is. And so again, it's not to say that going to college isn't part of that, but also, what defines your success is up to you. And always aspire for the best for yourself, but don't feel under any egregious or overbearing pressure to fit somebody else's idea of what success is. You do your best in relation with those who you trust and you love. Come out the best you can with that. So
one final question before we wrap up here.
sure.
So if you could tell the general public one thing about dyslexia that you think everyone should know, what would it be?
I would say to the public at large that America seems to be trending in a direction of sensitivity and responsibility for those who I would call neurodiverse. And we're seeing a lot of neurodiversity. And some people call it neurodivergence, and that's fine. I choose diversity versus divergence. And I would say that continue with the sensitivity, and don't go overboard. Don't go into the performative stage, but also we're moving away from that period of time, or the continuity of time where people who with learning disabilities were ridiculed. They were terrible things were said, and it's not just dyslexia, but anybody who's challenged. I would say let's continue as a community and as a culture to support, and autism awareness is an excellent example of this, where nobody is making fun of, like, God forbid, nobody is making fun of autistic people or people on the spectrum, people with Asperger's, and that is a model for what we should do for all, and that no one should have to bear the stigma of a learning disability, uh, being taunted for it or being ridiculed for it. So if we could continue on that curve and continue to improve our way of being supportive, regardless, unconditionally supportive, that is my aspiration for the society at large, is to understand that where there's a will, there's a way, and when there's a will to make sure that everybody has the best opportunity they can, given whatever challenges they're dealing with, and they can be the best expression of themselves that they can be, then we're doing the right thing. We're on the right track. And that to shame or make fun of anyone for any kind of either physical or psycho-emotional or learning challenge or mental challenge, any however you want to phrase it. If we can just keep going in that direction, I think that's a huge step, is to be a community of support and encouragement and also diversity. It's a two-way street. So I was challenging Gen A and Gen Z to say, think differently, think creatively. And so we adults are the ones who are sort of passing the baton to them. And if we can help encourage that novel exploration of what does a reformed or more diverse expression of culture look like, that we can be there for them and not resist. Now, obviously, we have to help young people stay within bounds so that they, there's obvious caveats to all of this, but that if we can be encouraging as the elders to bring the next generation up with all the support and care that they can get to get them through any hurdles or challenges again. And I'll do my best to make sure I'm part of that, because I have a history, and so I'm empathetic to anyone struggling and going through the challenge. And I don't make a big deal about it in my regular. Again, I'm so glad to be on this show again to just finally speak about it, because I really don't ever. I joke about it sometimes, like if I do something silly or weird, I'm like, it's just my dyslexia. It's just I joke about it, but this is a great opportunity, Nicholas, to talk with you, and again, I'm deeply grateful for that. So yeah, that would be it. Just let's all be there for those who could benefit from our compassion.
Yeah, that's great, Justin. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. So where for our listeners and viewers, where can they find you on the internet?
Okay, and I appreciate you asking me that. I launched a website years ago, back in 2018. It's about 5 years old, and I've really not done a lot with it, but I'm starting to finally promote it and talk about it. And it's kind of a mindfulness practice, but what I do with people in there is it's adjacent to what we've been talking about. It deals with unpacking who we are, our identity, our beliefs, and our perceptions of the world, things like that, and just asking us to put things on the table. And this goes to the skepticism that I was speaking of earlier, is to launch an inquiry into your relation with the world, your relationship with other people, and your relationship with your identity and the layers of the identity that you have. And so my intention with this and my aspiration for this is to help people who are struggling with perhaps subclinical anxiety or being depressive sometimes, because life is just overwhelming and it's challenging, and people are looking for a way to sort of manage themselves. And what I do, none of it is prescriptive, none of it is dictatorial. It is more that inquiry process that I talked about. So I just want to pass that along to people, and it's in this website, and it's free. And I'm available by email if somebody's using the website and they have questions. I'm always there to answer the questions. See what happens. But again, so that's what I do, and it's free again, and it's called illuminlife.org, and you're welcome to visit that. You're welcome to go to my IdeaCast interview series on YouTube and check that out. I interview a lot of amazing folks on there, and they inspire me, and they're people from academia, they're just everyday folks, but everything is grounded in sense making, meaning making, and purpose discovery, again, just to help with human flourishing and allowing people to relieve themselves of some of the burdens that we have in our modern world.
Thank you again, Justin, for coming on Dyslexia Journey and sharing your story and your journey.
Nicholas, again, much gratitude to you and Sonia for doing this project, and myself and all the other guests that you have. I just hope that that lives are touched and hope is there, and people can feel good by some of the stories they hear on your show. So thank you for letting me be a little part of that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.